here yet. Okay, it's very strange. That was a little slow. All right, we just took the roll if in case it didn't record, even though I had pressed record before. And everyone is here from the committee except for Jeff Rudolph. All right, Dick, I'm going to hand it over to you to continue going through your questions, then we'll talk about my questions afterwards.
Right. I think the next question to get to, if I'm not mistaken, was, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to post these if we can.
Yeah, so I just asked Nicole to.
I mean, to bring them up, if that makes.
Yes, I think that does make sense. I was actually going to grab them from Monday or Tuesday, whatever that meeting was. I'm happy to share them when I find them. I need a second.
Can I get clarity of our agenda today? And I came in, I think, when you were talking about this, but what posted online is continued review of questions for town and PSB. So this is, just to be clear, this is the questions that we had started talking about on Tuesday. We're finishing that work. And then it says questions about the forecast. And that presume is about yesterday's meeting, right? Or is that about the questions we started talking about on Tuesday?
So I had sent some additional questions, and I haven't yet watched the meeting from last night, so apologies. I just wanted to make sure that we also reviewed the questions or made people aware that I had these questions, some of which might have been answered last night. I'm catching up, but I will
okay.
before Monday. So the two items are complete the review of Dick's questions, number one, and number two, go through my questions as well. And Nicole posted the proposed schedule that I had emailed out as well, which we had spoken about at the tail end of.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think I came in late when you were talking about that, so that's helpful.
All right, and Jeff, I'm just making you a co-host, so just.
And just to say, when we get to it, some of your questions were actually discussed last night, so I think it'll resolve it, or at least some of them.
Okay, great. All right, so I will share Dick's document.
We go down
to
the school page. And I think the next one is the second bullet from the bottom of that page. Up a little. It's a comparison of class size, certified there we go. I think it's the second last one on that page is the next one to discuss.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
So this one.
And this was, yeah, I'm sorry. This was actually raised by some questions that Sarah raised when she was still on the committee. And I think, I don't know whether Dr. Schmuckler is addressing this as part of her work or not. I just thought I would put it out there.
Can you, just so I understand, are we talking about all class sizes or special education classes?
This is special education.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the regulation deals with the number of special education students relative to teachers, total class size, and aides. And
so this is the thing of like, you can have, I think it's like 6 students with one educator, except you can have 12 if you have an aide.
12,
that's what we're referring to.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Got it. And so this is like learning centers, basically learning centers is what this is asking about.
Okay. Go on. The next one is regards to breakage, and really it's the next two, and this I think really goes to the assumptions underlying the wage forecast, the budget forecast. How was breakage somehow figured into that? How was it figured in? How does it
Susan
compare.
is here.
Correct.
I'm wondering if it doesn't make sense. I don't want to put you on the spot, Susan, but I was wondering if it made sense to, given what we've talked about on Tuesday, to reword the question, the way that we've talked about rewording the questions, get your feedback on them. Because I think this question of breakage is actually already baked into your first question, Dick, about what assumptions were made in the salary
Right.
projections, the year-to-year salary projections. So
Right. And this one does just, it does say, what, just as a benchmark, what were the numbers in the past couple of years, if possible, and I assume that information is available. The numbers who left the employ, the numbers who were hired, and my understanding is there is some savings from that, but I don't know how that was worked into the forecasts.
my suggestion is that in the revision of the questions, when we just talk about the salary, like it's going to be in there. That's already part of it. So just considering breakage, it should just get rolled up with that other question.
Okay. And do we know the numbers that are
Of what,
assumed?
of breakage? I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
No,
And part of,
I don't
but
expect you
I'm
to.
quite sure Susan's here and I'm quite sure she does know what numbers she's baked in.
Fine.
And I also know, I don't want to speak for her, but I also know that like some of the amazing work that she and her team have been doing around improving staff hiring meant that like for this year, we ended up with almost all the positions filled. So in a year where you have more positions filled, which is great, you have less breakage. So I would presume her assumptions have changed over time given that work, but she could respond. I don't want to put you on the spot now, Susan, but like this is something she could talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't carry breakage in the budget per se. When I actually create the budget, as opposed to, giving you a forecast, it's based on all of the changes that have occurred over the course of the year. So, in other words, if I have staff that are retiring in the budget, I'm not carrying the higher salary. I'm carrying our placeholder, which is master's step 6. So the numbers that you see were presented last night incorporated all of that. But I don't go person by person. I just to do some kind of analysis on it. Certainly, I suppose I could, but that would be
But do you carry some
sure
sort
we-
of like flat amount of like, I'm making this up, like 300,000 sort of like imagine from 27 to 28. Obviously, no one's told you they're retiring yet. So do you carry any sort of like flat amount of sort of representing a presumed future breakage or
It's a
no?
great question. So this year we're doing an early retirement incentive. So I'm not carrying breakage because I've already taken it. But if we weren't doing an early retirement and I didn't know what, if let's say at this point I had nobody that had submitted retirement paperwork, because one of the things about PSB is that there's no requirement to notify us with any advanced time frame. So last year, because I didn't know, I was carrying $500,000. In the numbers that I've given you, I've already taken the retirements for people who have submitted, which is pretty consistent with ultimately the number of retirees we had last year. So in the forecast right now, I'm not carrying a set amount of breakage because I've already taken it. It's already reflected.
Susan, just so you know, Dick had submitted these questions, and when we were talking through them, it seems like while there were detailed questions here, it was really more about, for example, the wage changes year to year. It was really more about the assumptions that were baked into the year-to-year wage changes. So it sounds like you're addressing part of this now. And there's probably other things, like, for example, like you've just alluded to, from 26 to 27, like we're dealing with an actual staff, but then 27 to 28, how did you roll everyone ahead at some like predetermined like percentage? And obviously you wouldn't talk about the details of what's related to negotiations, but like, how did you handle the out years for salary, for what you're carrying for salaries?
So yeah, happy to answer that. And so in the forecast portion, what I did is I took uh, what we incurred for costs for steps and lanes. So I do track that information. And then I multiplied it by the amount that we are anticipating COLA will be through the settlements. And then I added that plus the COLA to my base salary number. So in 27 now, it's not a forecast. That is what the number is. It includes all those components. As of the 15th of January, I had all of the staff who anticipated lane movements. The deadline was the 15th. So I incorporated all of those. So I know what that number is for this year. For next year, I'm just carrying the same amount uh, of lane costs into the future that I incurred this year. Does that make sense?
Meaning you're presuming the same amount of lane increase year to year.
Correct.
Like that
And
there
I-
will be a similar number of people. Okay.
Moving. And I do that because when I analyze this salary guide for teachers, which is predominantly where the lane movement comes from, we have 52% of our staff that are active in the grid and 48% that are already topped out. So with that percentage of staff and active in the grid, I felt pretty confident that we'd have a similar number of lane movements in the out years as we've experienced. And the other thing is when I did calculate lane, it wasn't significantly different between what I tracked last year and what this year's turned out to be. So I feel pretty good about using that number in the out years.
Dr. Givens, let me, maybe I missed the answer to this question, but my understanding from an earlier discussion at an earlier meeting was that there were savings from year to year as individuals retired and new people were hired.
Yes.
Which you referred to as breakage in my
Yes.
recollection.
Yep.
And my question is, these two bullets, how many people retire, how many people are hired, and what is the dollar impact of that? And how do you assess that? What has that been in the past, and how have you forecast that for the future? So let me try to break that down. How many teachers have generally leave in a year? What number do you use for that?
I don't forecast out how many teachers will leave because we're replacing them. But for retirements, for example, in this year's budget, there's 7 retirements.
Okay.
I'd have to count last year, but it's under 10 that we retired in the current year. So when that happens, and not all the teachers leave at the same leave us at the same lane and step. So let me give you an example. And this is just example, right? One teacher who retired was at 114,000. Another one left and had topped out at 130. So
Right.
it's the difference between their salary and master's 6. So what I do is I take that person off and I replace them with a generic master's step 6. And then I tell the hiring managers that that is the number that we're using for a carrying number. And this year, I will say that they have been really good about hiring on average at a master's 6. That had not been so the prior couple of years. And sometimes it depends too, Dick, on what kind of a position. So if you have a chemistry teacher that leaves, or a physics teacher even, better example, there aren't many of them out there. And so you're going to hire the person that you can find that's qualified. And that might not be at a master six. So I try to look at and encourage them to look at the average. So if they've hired somebody higher, and there's somebody that's qualified at let's say a bachelor's 4 instead of a master's, then we try to average that out. So that's kind of how we approach it.
Okay.
So
So
it varies. And in this year, we approached the school committee to ask if they would be comfortable with us doing an early retirement incentive program. And so we've incentivized teachers to retire with a $20,000 bump for 1 year. Does have overall, it does reduce your gross salaries, when you do that for the next couple of years. Eventually, the staff roll through your salary guide and they'll top out as well. So it'll help over the next couple of years to have the lower base salary.
okay.
Cliff,
So
oh, sorry, Cliff has a hand raised, but go ahead, Dick, if you had
no, I'm just trying to pin this down a little more.
Yeah.
So 7 to 10 say retire in a year.
Yep.
How many leave in a year without retiring?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but
Roughly?
yeah, I that's not something I can pull out of the noggin on a Friday at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Well, how many are hired? How many are hired in a year at this master's?
I do have I do have some exit and hiring information from the beginning of this year, and I can go back and pull that up. I gave a report to the school committee about that. So
Okay.
I do have that. I can't pluck it out of my mind in this moment. But I do have that, and let me make myself a note, and I'm happy to provide you more information on that.
Okay, thank you. Because what
Yeah.
the reason behind these questions is it was my understanding from a discussion earlier in this process that the people who left, whether retired or leaving, were generally at a higher place on the step and lane grid than the people who are newly hired. And
Yeah,
that,
I wouldn't say that as a generalized comment, no.
but I mean, that's clearly not true. For example, I would think in the case of having to hire a physics or
Right.
a chemistry teacher, but that concept of breakage was something that was, as I recall it, presented as a potential reason for reduced costs from year to year, with more senior people being replaced by more junior people.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm trying to probe here. So
Kind of suss out, yeah. So last year, the number that I used that I carried because I didn't know what retirements would be was 500,000. This year I've taken the savings already from that in the FY27 budget. Could that shift a little bit? Perhaps, but I expect anybody that wanted to retire or was contemplating retirement this year would want the incentive. So I don't anticipate we'll see a lot there. We do have turnover, of course, it's not related to retirement.
right.
And for those that are leaving, it's not always people at the top. Brookline's a very challenging place to commute to. So what we do see is younger staff coming in, getting a few years perhaps under their belt, but then settling out in another community and then seeking employment at a place that's much more accessible. So we do have staff that do turn over that are not higher up on the scale and maybe replaced with other people. So there's both ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
for the turnover. But I can give you information about, how many people left and how many new hires did we have. I do have that. It's just 6, 7 months
Okay, now,
way
I
that
mean,
I
that's,
presented that. So I just would have to go back and look, and I can share that with you for sure.
okay, we're really perhaps exhausting this point, but uh, the question was what the numbers were and how that perhaps figured into the forecast going forward. And this $500,000 in savings, that came from the early retirement of not 10 people basically being replaced. Is that?
That's what I was banking on.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Cliff, do you want to ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, I mean, Dick's right. We shouldn't belabor this too much, but the concept of breakage in pro forma budgets for the fall, next coming fiscal year is something that has been, included in, I think, almost every budget presentation that I've seen over the last 10, 12 years. It's sort of something people expect to see, because it provides context for how things change. And I would anticipate, if you already know that there's a group of people who are leaving, and you know the salaries, compensation associated with them, that I would think it'd be pretty easy to put that into a line and show what it was that the quote unquote cost of those people or savings from those people leaving are. You don't need to match up one by one the replacements, but it's more than then you're looking at what the total salary line is for what is coming. But it gives people the context that they're used to seeing. And to the extent that there's turnover during the year that generally does lead to savings, like we certainly see that in other parts of the town as well. I think that is also an assumption in your numbers that would be appropriate for people to understand and to see.
Okay.
Okay. Onward. The next bullet is, if nobody has anything further, the next bullet is sort of a wrap-up question about, are there other assumptions? What assumptions went into the budget forecasts for 27, 28, 29? And I gather that that information, from what I heard, is something that will be provided, and you've sort of outlined some of the assumptions that you used and how you derive the data. Any questions, comments?
Is that accurate, Susan?
To me, this one just sort of rolls up with the broader question of like, this is basically it. What are all the assumptions? And again,
Yeah.
Susan, the idea is just that this was Dick's initial pass at questions to ask to just get clarity on the budget. And there's one about the wage increase and one about
Transportation.
employee counts, and there's a couple of other ones, but you're not necessarily being asked to answer these on the fly. It's about making them making a tighter, shorter list of questions so that the request is as streamlined as possible. But these are good questions, I think, from thinking about the presentation to school committee in a week and a half too, because they just talk about like, staff head counts or I should say staff FTE count growth over time and such. And then this last one, I mean, I think, Dick, you're asking for the PSB employees. Essentially, you're asking for our total FTE and the fraction that is on the general fund versus I won't say the fraction, the number that's on the general fund versus those that are on grant.
Yeah, well, the last, let me just back up to the last comment and to explain to Susan, who was not at our last meeting. The concern that I had, and I really did focus on two areas. One was the wage line and the other was the transportation line, was that what we saw was essentially just a gross number showing millions, going from X million to Y million. And the questions were addressed to the issue of how did we get from one to the other? What were the assumptions? And I identified what I thought would be driving factors in getting from one to the other. So this final bullet is, I was thinking of the question of, and this is an issue that arises on the town side and was certainly addressed to the town as well. We get grant funding for positions. Is that grant funding something that we can expect will be consistent, or are we looking perhaps at a cliff with grant funding and people being hired under grants and then not having that grant funding anymore? And it actually may be less true on the school side than it is on the town side, but
Yeah. So in the budget, we're anticipating we will be receiving our two larger federal grants moving forward. So that would be the IDEA grant, which is just south of 3 million, and our Title I grant, which is about 600,000 this year. When looking at the budget at the federal level, and what's been proposed by the president and House and various iterations, I don't see any world in which our Title II, III, and IV will be funded moving forward. So in the forecast and in our budget, we are making some accommodations for those. Those are the smaller three. But in addition to that, we've been looking at efficiencies and, ways that we can deliver services without compromising the program for less money, so that we are not having to absorb, every dollar that's of money that we're losing in the grants in order to be able to continue with some of the programming. So that is the way the landscape looks at this time, and hopefully IDEA and Title I will continue to get funded in the out years. I'm assuming they will. I have no reason to believe they won't. But that is what we're looking at.
thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the schools that there are few, if any, school grants that are coming from private parties that are specialized and saying, we'll give you X dollars for Y years for this purpose.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're on your own.
There's a
But-
couple of exceptions to this, Dick. But the
Okay,
school committee has been quite attuned to this because it's because of the burden of assuming onto the operating budget, that could be perhaps implied, but we need to have it be an explicit part of discussion. And so one of them is the Innovation Fund, and which used to be the 21st Century Fund at the high school, and now it's called the Innovation Fund. And so they do things like providing new funds for allowing curriculum to be developed. So like they'll provide like a course release. And that does not have any sort of impact on the budget. But there's some they'll create like help create provide the startup for creating new programming. And some of those programs, if they're chosen to be adopted, do have a potential staff implication of typically like 0.2 or something like that. And even at that level, school committee is quite attuned to it, because you think, even if you're doing one or two a year, that still could be, the equivalent of quite a bit of money as it stacks up over multiple years. And so what we've said is just having everyone be attuned to the budget impact, and that we discuss, because the innovation fund, especially for these kind of program developments, they're multi-year funding from the innovation fund. And so we've been discussing about sort of at the upfront, having understanding whether something would be cost neutral or whether there might be any sort of programmatic impact down the road. So I think it's been helpful to have that kind of awareness. And then also with any gifts, and I'll give an example. There is a gift that's come from a anonymous private donor to support the sustainability efforts of the schools. And so it's funded principally capital items like new dishwashers, but it's also funded the salary for the school's sustainability coordinator. But the school committee has been very firm in its understanding that we realize that this is a position funded through the gift, and we have not made any commitment to retaining that position, at least to this point. But with those are pretty limited exceptions, and we don't have any more that I can think of that have that kind of impact. And we're very attuned to them.
Okay, well, if that could be clarified, that'd be great. Thank you. If nobody has anything, let me move on. The next question.
So actually,
just,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
let me interrupt you for 1 second. Cliff, your hand is still raised. Is that just
I'm sorry.
before?
I apologize. Cliff is muted. Cliff, you're muted.
Oh, you can he can't unmute, or
He can't
Yeah.
unmute himself.
I don't know. I'm not able to unmute him. And he is a
Let
co-host.
me,
Okay, all right. Why don't you keep going? Oh, Cliff.
Yeah, I don't, I was
There you
trying to I was trying to lower the hand. I don't have not anything to ask.
All right. Okay, go ahead, Dick.
okay, the other item, and I really looked at the various lines and just picked the two that had the largest fiscal impact. The other was the increase in transportation, and I note that Sadaf, you raised the same issue in your paragraph or your number 3 item on the questions that you raised. And that was, what are the assumptions? What was the data that led to the significant increase in transportation costs from fiscal year 26 and going forward?
Mm-hmm. So do you want me to speak to that at all, or you just want to see
I mean,
the trend, the kind of the trend information?
No, I had sent this information to the schools and to the town to see if there was any ambiguity or any information was not available with respect to these questions. I don't think, I mean, it's 22 minutes to 4 at this point. I'm not sure that this was intended as a time to grill you, Dr. Givens, about these questions.
Yeah, my goal was that we would just go through these questions and make sure that this is the right list of questions, and that they're either answered at the Monday budget review meeting to the extent that that's appropriate, or they're answered offline to the extent that it's a longer answer or requires additional data. So I would like to just to go ahead and to the extent that Susan, you or Mariah, you have clarifying questions, or the rest of the group has additional comments or questions, refinements, etc., please chime in. Otherwise, let's get through this and then we can go through my document, which I think will.
Given that we're not going to have time to wordsmith the final set of questions, does it make sense that offline Dick and I coordinate just to agree that like these are the questions we're asking PSB and then we can send them over the weekend? Is that okay? That would not be an OML issue. Go ahead, Dick.
No,
Sorry.
I actually had, I was sort of hoping that at some point there would be a minutes of these meetings so that, or at least of where we landed with respect to the questions.
So can you and I take
confess,
that
Mariah,
on?
I'm
Like,
not taking notes as we go through.
I feel comfortable that I think that what we've done in talking is in my head. And if you and I can just like, if I put it together and you said, yes, this looks good, that would be like sufficient for me.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that okay?
I would be inclined to fly it by the other members of the committee at the same time, and there's no reason not to do that, and we'll make it a public document.
But then it won't happen before our next meeting. And our next meeting is when Bella is supposed to come back.
Okay.
So why don't
I think we can, let's see where we go. You can certainly do that. We try to turn it around. But
I think some of this information is, but Mariah said, would be in the budget document anyways, but
yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
it's
that-
customary for me to provide it and I intend to do so. Some things might be, you know, a little more unusual than what I typically provide. So first I'll focus on getting, the budget document put together with, the details there, and then I can come back and whatever, additional questions you have, then I'll happy to provide, more detail in areas that I don't cover in the four corners of the budget document that we'll be presenting.
that's what
And-
I think is what's going to end up sort of happening is it's not that these questions are going to be answered on Monday, but more likely you'll say, yep, this one will be on, you'll see this one in a week in the budget book, or, you know, yes, like, or I can make sure to add this sort of perspective in the budget book or whatever, or, you know, this one won't be covered and I can get to it after the budget book or whatever, right? But I
Yeah.
think generally they're going to either be covered in the budget book and you already have it written, or like you'll just tweak your write-up to include it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, some of these things I can just incorporate, I think, you know, other things like the FTE count and what gets charged to what fund, that's customary. I do that anyway. So yeah, I just haven't done it yet, but that's the work I'll be doing next.
Okay, so then, Mariah, you and Dick are gonna do some iteration of this offline, and then we'll share the final list of questions, or the revised list of questions based on your collaboration at the Monday meeting.
yeah, and I will tell you that I will fly that by other members of this committee, because as I say, I have not been taking detailed notes here as we've been going through, and so
Yep, I understand.
okay.
All right. Did you want to comment on these pieces?
I will comment that you all had asked me to go back and to get the answer to the 115, and Hal said he would get this information, but he said that on Tuesday or Wednesday, but it would take him until early next week.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yep, that's coming.
Okay, and I think that I do recall the question was not just the 115 subject areas, but generally whether there was information about teaching loads for for teachers not identified individually.
Right, the distribution of teaching load.
Correct, right. So
priority.
it's
Yeah.
it's not average overall, it's
Right.
distribution by academic subject unidentified.
Right.
Right.
So the way I described it to him was like in ELA, you could have like, you know, 110, 115, 115, 118, 100, right? Like it's just going to be the numbers with no names associated. And if there's 15 teachers, there's 15 numbers, that sort of thing.
Okay. The prior question, that is a question about what the other assigned duties are. And I know, Mariah, you said there could be tutorial. Other people have said this is just sitting at a study hall. I do not know what quote
I
unquote
think I
others
said
think.
advisory, tutorial, those are the most common kinds of things. Tutorial is theoretically, one could call it a type of study hall. It's the executive functioning support for students. So it's, but I think that's a little bit of a misnomer to call it a study hall.
What counts as a +1, I guess, is the question. Maybe that's the way to ask the question.
You want to know all of the +1 theoretical combinations?
Are there any, I mean, you've identified tutorials.
Yes, those are the most common, but I can go find, if you, are you asking like, what are the other things that theoretically people could be assigned to? I could go find
Yeah.
out if that's
Okay.
what you're asking.
Okay.
Is that what the committee wants to know? What other types of +1s are?
I mean, I would be interested, but I'm not sure that that's the top. That is not the top of the on the list. If the vast majority are advisory and tutorial, then I don't know. I'd be curious, but curious what others think or how we would use that.
Yeah, I mean, academically, it's always nice to see enumerated lists of this kind of stuff, but I think if there's like an 80-20 or 90-10 rule, I'm more than happy to just look at the 80 or 90.
It is definitely an 80-20, possibly 90-10 situation.
Yeah, then
Okay. If we
Yeah,
can,
I do think
if we
what's
can identify.
interesting. Yeah, I think what's interesting about this specifically, though, is just that because it did come up in the collective bargaining conversations, um, it would be helpful to know examples of what else it might be, even if it's not detailed. Okay, go ahead, Dick. I'm sorry, you were talking.
Okay. And if we can do it with the 90% are this, 50% are this, 40% are this, let's do that. Okay.
Okay.
Your questions.
I do not promise to get a percentage breakdown of all of the tutorial, which is what you just said, because that's not what I understood earlier from the committee,
No,
which
no,
was
no,
they
no,
want a general sense.
No, I think when we said 80-20 was that, if the vast majority, if 80 or 90% are tutorial and advisory, then that's probably sufficient. But I'm, out of curiosity, I'm interested in what some of these other things are, given that it came up in collective bargaining.
And that's what I thought you were saying, Mariah, by the 80-20 or 90-10.
Yeah, but then you just said, oh, and if 40% are this and 20%
No,
are
no,
this,
no,
which is
but
not the same thing. Okay.
Okay, well, if 40% are tutorials and 50% are advisory, and that gets you to 90%. I mean,
Okay, as long as that's, yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. And so again, apologies. I haven't had a chance to watch last night's meeting. I wasn't able to watch that real time. I did email these out. It's obviously a short document. So if people want to take a quick look, if you haven't reviewed it already, the goal would be to address these things on Monday to the extent that they were not covered in the meeting last night, which I'll watch this weekend. But if there are any clarifying questions, then I can address this now.
I think 1 was partially addressed, 2 was addressed. 3, we did not get the details on, but it will be in the budget book. We've just talked about this. It's also in Dick's questions, as we just talked about.
Yeah.
4, we did talk about last night, both explicitly A and B as well. And 5, we have not talked about at all.
Okay. And so number 5, I mean, it's not a line item in the document from last night, and it wasn't before. So has this work been done? Because this is something, Mariah, if you recall, when we talked about this earlier in the process,
Yep.
similar to out of district placements, given that the ask was that as the PSB team actually does the forecast, that they would take a look at it.
I don't know. You'd have to, Susan's here and I don't know if she has an answer at the moment. As to whether or not, I know we've talked about them considering, as you say, like, for example, parking spots, and we've talked about the complexity of this, given the ongoing connection with rec and the overall use of the buildings, but I don't know if Susan has more to add about it right now.
No, I can say that we have had some preliminary discussions about the idea of parking spots and other facilities, but that has not risen to the top of the to-do list yet. So we have been looking a little more closely at how rentals will be administered, but I don't know that we'll have that fully, baked in 2 weeks. Some of these are going to have to be ongoing conversations throughout the budget process.
Okay.
We only have so much capacity to do analysis and meet the other demands that are being placed on us. So
I understand.
Yeah.
Really, you think things are more important than parking spots, Dr. Gibbons?
For $100 a month.
That is not what I said, Dick. That is not.
No, that was a joke. That was a joke.
I took it as such. I took it as such.
I actually do have a question about, or a thought about number 4. And when I saw the heading OOD placements, I had assumed, Sadaf, that you were thinking about placement of Brookline resident students in out-of-district schools. And then I read the question, and it appears that that the question is really addressed to out-of-district students coming in and are offering placements to them within the Brookline system.
That's right. But oh, go ahead, please finish.
Along the way, somebody made the comment that the parents who would be looking for this would be the parents who were dissatisfied with their existing school districts and would probably put a burden on the Brookline schools that was beyond what was anticipated. And I guess the question is,
Dick, I just want to say,
yeah.
I know you don't know this, but there is a lot of offensive assumptions baked into what you just said.
Okay, I'm saying
And
that,
that's why I know you heard it from someone, and I just want to tell you that so that you know that.
So, but I guess my question would be, if we were to do this, and here's my question: if we were to do this, would we be taking on the responsibility of, for example, placing those students in an out-of-district situation if they were not satisfied? Would we in essence become their quote unquote resident district? And that's probably not the correct term.
So Mariah's shaking her head, and I mean, my assumption would be no, right? They still have a district, and that home district is responsible for that student.
Can I just say, what we talked about last night, just in terms of the fees? I'm going to keep this just to the fees bit of this. Is that although Susan has rightfully, what I think, implemented a plan to have us visit fees on a 3-year cycle to minimize the administrative burden of managing fees, we talked about explicitly having this one not be on that, especially up front, because, while as the team is developing this, there may be the need to adjust fees as other things, may not have been initially considered. That's what we talked about last night. I don't think the things that you're talking about driven to parent dissatisfaction or anything like that are relevant. And PSB does not become the home district for these students. But nonetheless, we've talked about maintaining agility in terms of the administration and the fee setting for this.
Okay, I'm just raising what I'm hearing is a cautionary note that I don't know exactly what would be assumed by Brookline if it expanded this program or began this program. So, okay.
Susan,
Alright.
is there anything that I missed that you want to add to that?
No, no, I think what you said is spot on. You know, we're not we would be more of a placement for a student from another school district. We wouldn't be the resident school district, as Dick had mentioned. So also there would be intake, right? And so students would not just say, hey, I want to go to Brookline. We would evaluate the fit for our program. So if we did not feel that it was a good fit based on the student population that was currently in the program and or the needs were beyond perhaps what our program could accommodate, then that student wouldn't be considered for
Okay.
one of the slots.
I'm sorry, Mariah, I didn't understand, when you said this, you are not considering the fees at this point, or did I
No,
misunderstand?
we're not putting them on a 3-year cycle at this point, unlike our other fees that we are trying to consider on a 3-year cycle. So that, say we have 10 fees, we don't have to consider 10 every year. We do 3 each year or so to minimize the administrative burden and the burden on school committee processes. However, this fee is new, and there's, as we're ramping up and considering this program, we want to make sure that we are not setting it on a 3-year cycle. We're intentionally keeping it as a 1-year to be reconsidered every year.
But I would now, putting on my hat, I would think that once you accepted a student into this program, when you say you're doing it on a 1-year basis, you would have some, if not a legal, at least a moral commitment to retain that student in the program.
But that has nothing to do with the fees. The fees have to do with what the other school district pays.
Which would have to be negotiated with the other school district?
We're setting the fee. So
Okay.
one of these two of the programs that were voted last night are in the $67,000 to $68,000 range. So that is the projected cost for the next year that the other school district would pay if they were
Okay.
to enter next year, right? And then the fees though get renegotiated every year. So it's not that the other school district is going to pull their student because the fees have to go up by 10% or anything like that. There's the student, presuming that it's still a good fit, stays, but the fee is increased to whatever PSB sets the fee to.
Would the other district be able to say, we're not going to pay that fee?
Not if they want to attend our program. We set the fee.
Correct. This is why out of district tuition, Dick, increases because these programs, a lot of these specialized programs increase at higher rates. And for the ones that are true out of district programs, the state even can set their programs to have increases in the middle of the year. The state can do, like they did a couple of years ago, a general, I can't remember if it was 14% or 17% across the board increase on all programs. So there is a completely different model for how these programs are funded, and just the way the costing works for them.
But I guess my question is, we are vis-a-vis out-of-district tuition for Brookline resident students, we are in essence price takers. Whatever they charge, we end up paying.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, if the student wanted to be in the school, in the Brookline schools, if their parent or guardian wanted them to be in the Brookline schools, and Brookline wanted them to be in the Brookline schools, and we wanted to increase the fees by 10%, could the other district say, we're not going to pay that? Or would the contract?
I think you need to remember that this isn't just a child and a parent want this. This is an IEP placement. This is based on an IEP. And so it's not right. And so if an IEP determines that a certain environment is what that student needs, and that's determined to be in one of these programs, then that is what determines the placement, and the cost is not the
It's not the driver.
it's not the
So
driver.
the other community would be obligated. They would be
Correct.
bound to.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean,
Or
unless there's
they
a
would say,
comparable district, that comparable other program that they decide to switch to, and that no, they can't.
I don't believe that that is the case. I am pretty sure that the placement letter is signed, and the placement letter specifies, it's not that there's a whole process
Yeah.
um,
For the,
that is
for the
not,
good of
that
the
is not,
students,
a
the
district cannot,
continuity.
and as far as I know, Susan, can a district unilaterally initiate anything like what they're describing? I would also remind you that when the comps that were provided, Brookline's tuition structure was the
Right,
least expensive.
lower than everybody else. I was just curious about how the process works, you know, whether there are reasons why, you know, students get moved around later on, aside from fit.
But I'm not sure that this has to do with the questions and the forecast that you are worried about. Like, I want to be sensitive to the time.
No, I
Yeah.
totally understand. It was mostly for my understanding, like, you know, because it ends up being a little bit around how predictable the enrollment is, but we can talk
But
about it
that's a
later.
completely different question, which has nothing to do with tuition cost.
Yes,
People
you're
leave
right.
programs
It doesn't
for
have to do with.
IEP fit, not about the cost, right?
Correct, that's true.
And
But
we did
it does
talk
have to
about
do
that
with
last
the
night.
revenue.
People
Yeah.
come in and leave programs at different times, and it's for many different reasons.
Okay. Cliff, did you have something to say?
Whatever it was, it's gone.
Okay. All right, good, because it's 3:59. So this is my list of questions. I'm sure there'll be other questions. And then, you know, we'll get to it on Monday. On the revised schedule, I shared this over email. This was discussed at the tail end of our last meeting. This is just an FYI. So Monday's focus is really the budget follow-ups. We'll talk about the outline, we'll talk about the discussion, and, you know, sort of how we move forward on the full report, as well as, you know, hopefully we'll get to talk about the CLA response, if we're at that point.
I want to go back to February 2nd. There is no way that I'm going to have, I could show you the old model, but there's no way I would have enough information to explain how the new one would work. I just won't have it. There's going to be no way.
Okay.
Maybe like 2 weeks after that. But it's
Okay.
basically going to be too late at that point, is my interpretation, given the conversation yesterday and the timeline. Was it yesterday? Whenever we had the
Yeah.
full committee.
Yesterday or the day before, Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let me have a think about that. Cliff?
Yeah, so I do want to know when we're going to have a chance to talk about the facilities document,
Yes.
because that's
Yep.
something that, you know, if there's general agreement with it, it's sort of something that could be voted and sent out to the full committee pretty soon.
Let's, I think we have that on the list as other updates for Monday,
Okay,
other work stream updates. And Nicole, if you're still on, I believe you posted that document, but I don't know that Nicole can talk. I'm pretty sure it's on the agenda for Monday, and I'll confirm, Cliff.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, anything else from the group? Otherwise, we're gonna wrap on time-ish. Okay, all right, thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. Talk to you.
Thank you.
Monday.
Bye.
All right, bye.